All right, so I want to get started. Again, welcome to the Design and Innovation Student Panel with Yale SOM. My name is Julia Burke. I'm a coach in the Career Development Office, and I'll be the moderator for today. We're going to start with some introductions. We'll do a brief overview of the Career Development Office, the CDO, and then Design and Innovation at Yale SOM. And then we'll dive into some questions for our wonderful panelists today. So without further ado, let's do a quick overview of the CDO. So the CDO works with students to empower dynamic careers. We explore, educate, thrive together. We consist of two teams, the employer partnerships team, and then career education and coaching, which I'm a part of. So we work with you for coaching, career education, and recruiting to keep students informed with career news and updates, to explore each phase of a job and internship search, and to review and engage with resources and career platforms offered to Yale SOM students. We offer numerous resources, including a career management system called CMS. We have online career education, research, and skill building tools. There's one-on-one coaching. There's employer events spanning informational sessions to networking events and more. So that's a brief overview of the CDO. I want to kick it briefly to Saba and maybe Henry to talk a little bit about what design and innovation looks like at SOM.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. So I'm one of the co-leads of the Design and Innovation Club here, along with Henry. So our club, like as a broad mission, we're really just trying to promote design thinking as a culture among the student body. And we have three different pillars in how we do that. So we have a content piece of part of our club, which it has components of that include things like curriculum. So we teach a lot of like design thinking tools to people, how they can practice that. We host workshops. So they can actually get like hands-on experience using design thinking. Other things that fall within that would be things like learning how to prototype using like graphic tools. So it's a lot around the content and curriculum piece. We also do things around career. So we do, for those interested in pursuing career paths within design thinking, and design is a very broad space. So really help navigate that and think about connecting with alumni in that space and companies in that space so they can get a better sense of what that would look like. And then the third piece is community. So really just trying to get to know people who have similar interests, who are like-minded, who are interested in the space of innovation and design, and have like social events to get to know each other. And I'll let Henry and maybe Yusuf add if they want to add anything about the club and the culture.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sawa. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, I think that was great. Ultimately, the Design and Innovation Club is responding to the increasing desire and need to think really creatively about ways of looking at business, designing business models, and understanding that there's more and more jobs and more thought that goes into how do we innovate in this new time as the world is changing. And so it's a really fun, creative space that's really at the intersection of a lot of things. So we really try to collaborate with a bunch of other clubs on campus, a bunch of graduate schools across Yale, and professors in the SOM building. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that overview. Let's get into some introductions of all of our awesome panelists today, and then I'll get into some questions. Questions can certainly be asked by all of you, the participants, prospective students. Use that Q&A feature. We'll be monitoring that throughout the chat. So please do use the Q&A if you have a question for our panelists. But let's get some introductions started. So Yusuf, if you don't mind starting us off, please introduce yourself, maybe tell us, why SOM, where you interned this past summer.
For sure. Thank you, Julia. My name is Yusuf Hadi. I'm a second year at Yale School of Management, hailing from New York, born and raised, child of Egyptian immigrants. Why Yale SOM? Good question. So being in the Northeast was particularly important to me, but way beyond that, SOM really represented the best of many worlds. So Yale, I think, has a really unique opportunity to be not just the business school that is the most focused on society and the larger idea of humanity, but also design and innovation, creativity, and while still maintaining like really strong business fundamentals. So that was sort of what I was looking for in business schools. And I think I've really found it. So been really enjoying my experience so far. This past summer, I was working at IDEO, which is one of the premier design consultancies in the world. Really enjoyed my time there. Before that, I was at Deloitte Consulting as a strategy consultant, and I will be returning to Deloitte as a sponsored candidate, and be returning as a design and innovation consultant in the customer and marketing practice.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Yusuf. Saba, would love to hear from you next.
Yeah, for sure. So I also a second year student at Yale SOM. I'm originally from Pakistan. I grew up there, moved to the US for my undergrad. So I went to Penn. And then post Penn, I worked in a few different spaces. So I was working in the startup space for a little bit out in the Bay Area. I also worked in tech, like within a product management marketing teams. And then most recently before SOM, I was working in design consulting. So I was working at an organization called Ideas 42 that does behavioral science and design consulting for social impact orgs. So had a lot of cool experiences working in financial inclusion space and with refugee populations. This summer, I was actually working within impact investing. So I was very interested in exploring impact investing as well when I came to SOM. And I was working with workforce dev, social enterprises, also a lot of room for design innovation with the social entrepreneurship space. So it was super exciting. Post SOM, I'm still exploring. I am looking at a number of different things that are all going to be a lot more focused during the spring. So I'm looking at incubators, startups, as well as like design innovation units within other organizations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Henry, would love to hear from you too.
Sure, yeah. So before SOM, I had two parallel careers. One is in humanitarian aid. I was a field worker for Doctors Without Borders and focused on security, supply chain, and staff management in our field operations in humanitarian and crisis zones around the world, and based in New York as well. And then the other career, when I wasn't traveling and responding, I'm a chef, and I went to culinary school in Paris. I'm half French, and used food in different entrepreneurial ventures around the world, opened some pop-up restaurants, started a catering business, and use it as a sort of form and expression of activism and bringing people together in community development. So those were the two careers before SOM, and the idea here was I wanted to come to business school to find ways of bringing those two career paths together, and doing it in such a way that really thought about business and society in a really cohesive and thoughtful way, and SOM was that place. And so what I was looking for in business school was the ability to bring these two interests together, do it in a thoughtful way, and then finally to be around people that were interesting and creative and had these interesting intersections that I think are really important as our world becomes more connected, but also disjointed. So I found that, and all the classmates at SOM and Saba and Yusuf are just two of many, but two exceptional ones, have really brought me so much to my education. And so it goes beyond SOM, it goes to the other graduate schools that I've interacted with and taken classes at as well. So it's been a wonderful experience so far. This past summer, I worked as a business consultant for the National Park Service. I was in Yosemite National Park and worked on a cool project around their medical services in the National Park Service. And then after SOM, I'm still looking at a lot of different options, but focusing on strategy and operations in food innovation space, as well as design and innovation consulting spaces. So I'm looking forward to what's next.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, amazing panelists. We're so glad to have you all here. So let's dive into some questions from the participants today, from some prospective students. The reminder to those listening in today is that you can use the Q&A feature to ask your questions. So the first one we have, and I'm just going to open this up to anyone who wants to start, is do you get the chance to practically apply the theories you learned in class? And I guess that could be in the club, in an internship, etc.
Yeah, why don't I start and then maybe others can chime in. So yeah, I think there are a ton of opportunities to do that. One thing that we try to do as the Design and Innovation Club is to provide hands-on experience with applying design thinking. So we want to make it as experiential and practical as possible, because design thinking as a toolkit in of itself is something that you can only learn by doing. So that's a very important component of our club. And examples of few things we've done to like help do that is recently we did a workshop with startups that are incubated at Yale. So there's a entrepreneurship center at Yale where startups by students apply and they're housed there, they get support. And so we actually paired design students from our club with startups that were part of the entrepreneurship center to help them with ideation challenges in their early stage. So it was a very hands-on workshop where they ideated alongside the startups and helped them refine like either their business model or help think about like user needs and user research. So that's one example, but there are a lot of other similar workshops that we try to do with either external organizations that have like an ideation challenge or within like the broader Yale community. Yeah.
And speaking from like a curricular perspective, I think that a lot of the things I learned in the core, I applied over my summer at internship. There were, I think, a lot of opportunities to do that, whether it was like a framework from customer or some of the economic thinking that we use in competitor. I think there was a lot of chances for me to do that when I was working on my project this summer. So I think that in general, we have an extremely strong core. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities for you to grow and develop things that will relate to design and innovation. Even some classes like Innovator, which are specifically geared towards that, based in our core.
Yeah, I'll just add that there are so many opportunities in and out of the classroom to engage in both the local area of New Haven and beyond. And so it's so exciting to be given the tools and the resources, and then it's totally up to you to apply that practically. And that's really where I think, for me at least, as an experiential learner, those lessons have really borne fruit. So it's been great to be part of the Design and Innovation Club, where we give you that opportunity, but be it a student and involved with nonprofits and be on a board and work to consult for local organizations here.
Wonderful, thank you. So this next question talks a little bit about background. So what advice do you have for someone with a very non-quantitative background who wants to explore an MBA? How could one leverage design and innovation background in the application? And maybe we can just take one. We have a lot of great questions coming in. So if there's just one person who wants to respond here, that would be great.
Maybe I can take that because I had not a quant background. I think two things. One is there's so much about not having a quant background that you can bring, and the design and innovation frameworks and having a really human-centered mindset and an empathetic approach to problem solving is such a good way to leverage your experience and talk about how you approach problems and seek to solve them. And I think that's such a unique and important perspective to have. And the second thing is, many people know you're coming to business school to engage with that other skill. And so understanding why and how you want to learn those new skills, I think, is also an interesting and important way to frame that.
Thanks so much, Henry. That's really helpful info. This next question is actually for Yusuf. So this one is for you. Could you please elaborate on your experience at IDEO? This person has been exploring innovation consulting as a post-MBA goal and is just looking to know a little bit more about that firsthand experience.
For sure. So I think I'd begin by saying that there are a ton of amazing design consultancies out there, innovation consultancies, and there are a lot that recruit at SOM and beyond, or like in this ecosystem, right, of MBA and thinking through that. So I think my experience at IDEO was amazing. I think that I learned a lot of things that I'll carry with me for the rest of my career. And a lot of those are related to what Henry's talking about, like that empathetic approach, that human-centered approach to problem solving, thinking through what it means to be a brand in today's society, what it really is to be someone building a business, or what it could be to build a business, and in general, like ventures and what innovation really means. So I think that was an excellent experience, and I really encourage a lot of people to look at design consultancies if they're interested in the space. I know that we don't have a ton of time, but I'll plug my podcast that I did with Career Conversations. If you're interested, I did like a 20-minute talk about this. So I encourage that person to look it up. And yeah, did I miss anything on that question?
I don't think so. That really covers it, I think. Thank you so much for elaborating a bit more. So when we think about kind of engagement and being a Yale SOM student, I really love this next question. How much alumni network interaction can SOM students expect? Maybe Saba, if you want to start us off on this one?
Yeah, I'll take it. So I would say the interaction is actually quite high, at least from my experience, especially as someone who was exploring non-traditional career paths, because I did rely heavily on like alumni and see where they are working and sort of trying to connect with them. I think there's a couple of different touch points or like moments where I really relied on alumni. One is actually before I was even coming to Yale SOM, I connected a lot with alumni at different, like I was looking at design innovation and impact investing. So I know a lot of different career paths that I was interested in exploring during my time. So I got really good response from alumni. They were like very engaged with me and like helped me think through a lot of things and connected me with other resources. And then during my time as well, I think during my time at SOM, there've been like two different ways. So like one is like we also engage alumni through the Design and Innovation Club. So people who used to be design and innovation leaders in the past or are working at like organizations like IDEO, we'll have them back for like a panel, or they'll connect with us for other types of like support. And then there's also the second component, like outside of the club, just through like navigating career paths where informally I've connected with a lot of alumni and talked to them about different types of how they've navigated their research. So I've got really good engagement from them. Like almost everyone I've ever reached out to has responded and had gotten on the phone with me. So it's been a really positive experience.
Wonderful. Would anyone else like to chime in on that? There are so many resources to connect with SOM alumni. So if you have any anecdotes to share, I'm sure that would be appreciated.
I'll just add on that all my experiences with alumni while I was at IDEO and even in other places that I was sort of like interviewing with or experiencing have been absolutely fantastic. Like our community is really strong and people genuinely look out for each other. And so just to add on to Saba's point, I think that we really do have a really strong, I guess, familial network.
That's great. It's a wonderful way to describe it. There are a lot of resources through the Career Development Office to find alumni, to connect with peers. So let's transition kind of back to some classes. Have any of you taken any D&I related classes outside of SOM in your second year right now? Can you speak to those classes? Any recommendations?
I actually haven't taken any D&I classes necessarily, although I do apply D&I principles to classes outside of Yale and inside of outside of SOM and inside of SOM. So for example, I took a class at the law school. It was around creating a food policy or initiative. And so the purpose, it was a practicum class essentially, and we created a white paper. In my case, I wrote an executive order for the Biden administration. And in doing that project, coming up with the executive order and the different interventions we were highlighting required that we take a really wide angle approach. We ideated a ton of different ways of implementing our theory of change, and in a politically savvy way, as well as a realistic and climate friendly way. So that was an important process. And then we converged and finally used these different tools that we teach and leverage in the Design and Innovation Club to come up with a nice, succinct, and effective project for that class. But that's just one example, and I'm sure there are many more.
That's great. Yeah, there's so many classes you can take across schools. Yusuf, I saw you unmute yourself.
Yeah, I actually haven't had a chance to take either of these classes yet, but there was one class that my friend Candace was telling me about that she was in, and I found out about it a little too late. But it was cross-listed in the architecture school, and it's a design class where basically she's looking at the homes of animals and how it can relate to design principles in our lives, which I thought was just really interesting and like super inspiring. I think for all of us to find that we find inspiration in nature and in all these different areas of our life. And I think in the spring there's a class that I'm looking at that's like around managing the design life cycle. So I'm thinking I'll probably be taking that class.
Very cool. What an interesting course. I love to hear about that. I am going to move on to this next question. It kind of broadens up the conversation, maybe a little bit beyond design and innovation, but I think we can always loop that back in. So this question is, to what extent are you developing new skills versus practicing or seeking new applications of skills you came in with? It's kind of this balance of what is SOM bringing in terms of skills versus what might you have come in with that you're honing or seeking out. Any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, why don't I go first on that one? So I actually was very intentional about this. When I came to SOM, before I came, I really thought about what are like different things that I want to explore that are like net new. So one of like a few examples of those are, I did not have a very strong financial background. I was very interested in impact investing and I didn't know as much about the space. So I kind of tried to like the first year when I got in, I really wanted to do a lot more exploration and like seek out new things. So I joined, for instance, other clubs that I didn't have as much experience with. There were a lot of courses that helped with things like if I wanted to learn more about financial modeling. I was also very interested in learning things like sustainability. So I took up opportunities at the School of Environment. So they're just examples of things that I was like trying to seek out and learn. But then I've also brought back design and innovation. So I was working in design consulting, but then during the second year, I was like, I have so many ideas for different types of workshops and things I could do in the design and innovation space. And it's also a toolkit that I think you can keep practicing. So I leaned back in on things that I already had experience with to sort of give back to the community. So it's been sort of a good balance of like learning new things and also like leaning back into things that I really enjoy.
That's a wonderful answer. Thank you so much, Saba. Anything else that maybe Seth or Henry would like to add to that about bringing in or learning new skills or honing old ones as an MBA student at SOM? I think that's an interesting question.
I don't have much to add. I like Saba's point about like these toolkits, right? I think you can think about it very much into like what verticals or industries do I really have interest in and I'd like to explore versus like the horizontals or like what core skill sets I can bring to those. So sustainability, like Saba mentioned, is also something I was interested in. So I took a YSE or Yale School of the Environment class. And then I think that's also now becoming a toolkit that you can bring to many different industries. So just a good way of thinking about it. I think that you can have a very targeted approach once you get to school.
Wonderful, thank you. So this next question kind of thinks about design and innovation as it applies to education, like at the field of education. So I know that you've all talked a bit about your backgrounds. So the question is asking, have any of the panelists explored possibilities of design and innovation as it applies to education? Or maybe you know somebody from the D&I club who is interested in education and using D&I to kind of explore that. Do you have any anecdotes regarding this subject?
I can just go again on this one if anyone else wants to add after. So I'll just speak to two things. So prior to Yale, I did work in design consulting and I was applying it to the early childhood education space because one of our clients was interested in designing an education program focused on refugees. So I think the wonderful thing about Design Thinking Toolkit is that any space that requires a lot of like broad innovative thinking and is like a very challenging problem, it's a great toolkit. And so I was working in that space. So I do think there's a lot of application there. But I think at Yale, what is a really good opportunity is last year we did a collaboration with the Education Club. So it's the Design and Innovation Club and the Education Club did a joint event, the Education Design Challenge. And we were actually partnering with an external organization. So in this case, it was a university or school. And we were reimagining what the space of education should look like in the light of COVID. So it was an open design challenge. Teams were formed and they were working on this, and there was a panel of judges, and the organization also partnered with us in this event. And so that was a great event. We got great feedback for it, and we're actually doing it again this year. And some of the topics that we're exploring are things around workforce development as well. So thinking about upskilling and reskilling, especially with things like automation, with things like skills gap. We're thinking a lot about this, and we're engaging in conversations with external partners to help frame this design challenge. And we're going to do an event again this year for that.
That's so exciting. I'd love to hear about these events. And actually, that's a wonderful transition to one of our next questions about events through the D&I Club. The question is, could you talk more about different events or activities the Design and Innovation Club hosts? I know you had just elaborated on this kind of partnership between the D&I Club and education. I don't know, Youssef and Henry, if you'd like to elaborate further on what you've attended or what you've put together. I love the theme of cross-collaborating across different clubs. Let's elaborate. What kind of things does the D&I Club do?
So let me just jump in, and then I want to give Youssef an opportunity to talk about our upcoming NFT collab with him. But first, it's just, we have a lot of fun with our events, and we have a lot of events. And so as Saba mentioned, they sort of fit within 3 different categories: the career, the content, and the community. For careers, we have basically a panel every month rather, around a different space that D&I overlaps with in business. So we've done politics, we've done healthcare, we've done consulting, and so on and so forth. And in terms of content, we mentioned a bunch of these workshops that we do. So we'll teach some design 101 curriculum, and then we'll apply it in different contexts. So we have an education workshop, as we mentioned. We did a startup workshop. We'll do another one around business model generating, and bring in I think a healthcare startup in the mental health space, which would be really cool. And then in terms of the community, we have a lot of fun, popular events that we do. We hosted a Tiny Desk concert in Evans Courtyard, which was super beautiful, really fun. We have an Instagram where you can see all of the stuff that we've done and the different events. It's Yale SOM_DI. And we have hot ones coming up with some professors who will be in the hot seat. We have different mixers with the architecture school and different clubs on campus. So that's just a sneak peek at all the different events that we do. But coming soon, Youssef.
Great transition, Henry. Appreciate it. So I'm actually the leader of the FinTech Club as well. And so I'm collaborating with obviously Henry and Saba and the rest of the D&I Club to host an NFT week where we have a couple of events planned, namely thinking about what Web3 means. I think a lot of people in the design and innovation space are actively thinking about this. It's probably the thing that's hottest, especially after the Facebook announcement with Meta, things like that, as well as just in general, the crypto space. And so we'll be thinking about, okay, how do you design, or how do you create digital art? And then can we go through the process of creating digital art, publishing it if people want to, and then selling it if people want to. So having a workshop guiding people through that whole process. And then also having some small discussions thinking about what Web3 means for the future of the internet and things of that nature. So super excited, and obviously very topical as well. And I would say just very briefly on this topic that I would at SOM, we have some of the people who are most, I think, on top of this new generation of the internet, compared to people who are really thinking very far ahead. And it's been really exciting and inspirational for me as someone who's obviously wanting to work in the innovation space, to be around those kind of people. So it's been really cool.
These are such great events. And I have to say, I also saw that Tiny Desk in the courtyard as well, and it was very beautiful. So I appreciate the D&I Club's efforts. All right, so let's move into this next question. So we did just talk about kind of events, and this person is asking, could you elaborate on other design and innovation resources? We talked about classes, we talked about alumni. Are there kind of professors or other kind of clubs, or is there anything else that you can think of regarding design and innovation that we haven't yet talked about in terms of resources available to an SOM student?
Yeah, I can try to take this. So I think a few things that we haven't leveraged as much yet, and we're hoping to do more as the Design Innovation Club, is that there are a lot of labs and resources on campus that we can use to especially help us with things like prototyping. So like there's the engineering building, they have things like 3D printers, they have a lab, you can kind of work on more physical aspects of design. Again, like I mentioned, design space is so broad that you can really think about it in a lot of different ways. There's also, so I mentioned this briefly in the beginning, but the Sci-City is this entrepreneurial hub on campus. They do other types of workshops as well that are related to design. So sometimes they'll bring in speakers, and sometimes they'll have like mini workshops on how to think about like how practice design thinking, or like how to apply this to startups. And then the third thing I'll mention around courses that I don't think we've touched as much on is that there are a lot of entrepreneurship courses where you can actually, the whole class is actually coming up with a startup idea and then working through ideation. So there's entrepreneurship and new ventures. There's one called social entrepreneurship lab. So they both are similar, where you're thinking about a startup or social enterprise, you're thinking about a problem that you want to solve, and then you're trying to kind of build a startup around it. And you go through some of the ideation and the design thinking process to do that. So those are really good hands-on courses too.
Wonderful.
I'll just quickly mention the club has a handbook. We have a lot of resources that we can share with people when they join. And there's also a LinkedIn group that we're a part of that connects every alum who is in the design and innovation space or at some point in their career.
Wonderful. Lots of resources. And I'm glad that you mentioned Sci-City, the Center for Engineering and Innovation Design. There's a lot of on-campus resources there. Okay, moving into this next question. This says, one member of the audience is a consultant at Deloitte Customer and Marketing Practice. They say, hi, Yusuf. This person would love to know the international experiences SOM offers to those interested in D&I, but maybe in international markets. I know that we've just discussed your internships. They're all US based, but maybe you've spoken with someone or have an experience here. So let's start with that. It's a two-parter question, but I'll save the second part. So any international experiences within D&I that you've experienced or have insight on would be great.
Okay, Henry, do you want to go?
Go for it.
So I was just going to talk about a course that I took last year, which was Global Social Entrepreneurship. I think it's a great example of an international experience where you're working with a social enterprise and you get to actually kind of apply design thinking. It's a course that's offered. There's usually a travel component in non-COVID times, but you're partnered with a social enterprise in another country. So I was partnered with a school in Brazil. And it's kind of like a consulting engagement. They need support on a problem and you're supporting them through the semester. So very experiential. You get to form connections with this organization. And if you can travel, you get to go visit and be there on the ground. And they were dealing with a very large problem about thinking about scaling and thinking about their business model. And so we had to kind of apply this very innovative lens to like, how do you evaluate their business model, think about their business model compared to others? We did a lot of research in the space. And so it was a really good experience.
That's great. Thank you. And Henry, I noticed that you were unmuted.
Yeah, I'll just add that our faculty advisor, Rodrigo, is leading a trip to Peru for an international experience. And his work often looks at measuring impact and different innovations abroad. So he has great connections, and there are different opportunities within the curriculum space as well for that, as Saba had mentioned.
Wonderful. So this kind of takes a little bit of a turn. We're just kind of thinking about life at SOM now. How do all of you balance everything? Academics, social life, recruiting, etc. We would love to hear more about that from our participants.
I think you just got to prioritize. I think it's the same for any stage of life, really. It's like, you only have 2 years depending on if you're doing a full-time MBA, obviously. So I think really it's about prioritization, making sure that you're really, I actually came into school wanting to experience a lot of different things. I think I've adequately checked a lot of quote unquote boxes. But for me now, being in my second year, I think I know what I'm really enjoying and what I care to really develop in my second year. And so I've sort of doubled down on those spaces. And you know, I think a lot of it comes naturally, right? Through the bidding process, you have an opportunity to pick different courses that might touch on a lot of those different spaces. So from a curricular perspective, you're doing that. And then from a club and social experience, I think that Yale is actually really balanced. And I think we really do a great job of keeping people engaged throughout the year to keep everyone close together. And so I haven't really found too much of a challenge. I think recruiting can also be a sort of like the wrench in the equation, right? So depending on when and how long you're recruiting for, that can obviously create some, I guess, not challenges, but it can change the way you view your time. So.
Yeah, I'll just add to keep it really brief, lots of to-do lists. I have like a different to-do list for each category and just constantly updating that. So
That's a great point. Prioritization, staying organized. And you can always seek support. CDO is here, and there are lots of resources on campus as well to have a well-balanced and enriching experience at Yale SOM. So we're have so many wonderful questions. I'm just going to ask this last one before one of my last questions. Could anybody share a little bit more about kind of one interaction they had with an SOM peer that was really meaningful in the design and innovation space? You know, was there a conversation you had with a peer or maybe an alum that kind of really sparked a more conversation about design and innovation, kind of finding more inspiration from peers?
Actually, yesterday I had a first year reach out to me, and we were speaking about IDEO, what my internship was like. And this person had worked in sort of like the innovation space before school as well. And we talked pretty extensively about like why, or like what creativity means, and how creativity is really a misnomer in a lot of ways. Like we often place so much value on it when a lot of it is problem solving and thinking about problems, and how people can learn creativity over time or learn how to solve problems over time. And that there's like this like level of intuition that everyone brings, and that intuition is rooted in empathy and how people view problems themselves. And it was a really refreshing conversation that for like the last week or so, I hadn't really been very social. I've been really busy like leading up to Thanksgiving. And so it reminded me like, oh wow, like there are so many amazing people at SOM, specifically in D&I, like around the D&I space, that constantly are making me think in a way that is challenging, is bringing me closer to my values of doing that human-centered thinking, being human-centered in my design and in my future career. And I'm so happy that I had that conversation with that person who I know for sure I'll stay in touch with them for a long time. So just a quick example that was very recent, and you know, I think it's very representative.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you. Yeah, it really goes back to that community aspect. So we have 5 minutes left in this panel, and I really want to be sure all three of you can answer this last question. It's a two-part question, so I'll read it to you now. So what advice do you have for candidates preparing to apply to Yale SOM, and what do you wish you had known when you were applying? What's your advice? What do you wish you had known? And I'll let anyone start with this one.
I can start. So my advice, I think Yusuf touched on this a little bit earlier about prioritization. I think the time that you have here is so short, it goes by so fast, and there's just so many things you can do that prioritization is so key. And the advice I give a lot of people when they're applying is really take the time before you start to reflect on what you're hoping to get out of your like 2-year experience here. And how does that tie in with your values of like who you are as a person and what you're hoping to gain? Because when you come to business school, there's so many opportunities and so many different types of people that it's very easy to get caught in a stream or like go down a path that you weren't really expecting to go down. So having that time to reflect and being able to revisit that is just so important for you to make sure that you're getting the most from this experience. I think what I had wished I had known is kind of like similar to that. It's like, I think I had this like really idealistic thing of like, I want to do this and this and this, but the decisions that you have to make about prioritization come so soon, like very early on, like one club conflicts with the other. And so just knowing that is very important early on is something that I wish I had done so that I could have been a little bit more intentional. And I think I got there eventually, but just knowing that and being able to revisit and reflect on those values and making the time to do that is really, really important.
I think for me, I think this piece of advice goes for before pre-application and post. Don't just think about like what you want to be, and like so much of like business school in general is career driven and like what's that first step I'm taking outside of business school. But think about who you want to be and like keep that level of authenticity there. I think that's something that SOM looks for in the application process. I think it's something that people at school really value. And I think generally it's something that I've found at SOM, especially in my peers, has been really grounding, really an opportunity for me to constantly think about how I want to develop as a person and not just as like a career employee, etc. And so I would say that that's a really good way to frame things and think about things as you go throughout this process. Like I am X, Y, and Z as a like in my career, but who am I outside of that? What am I, and how do I approach that career? And I think constantly thinking about being a person of value is really important.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. One thing I think to keep in mind is you belong here. Doesn't matter where you've come from and what you've done. The question is, how do you interact with the world? What problems you want to solve? And how can you like tap into the successes you've already had and share that? We all have something to share. And so, bring that forward and make sure that you share it in the way that you've experienced it and the way that you hope to continue to share it later in life, both in your career and outside. I would say the other piece is that that I wish I'd known is that you do enter this process with a certain hypothesis and a certain introspection that goes along with that. And so think about those hypotheses. What do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? And this is what I think I can offer in these different ways. And hold on to that. And so when you do have to make these challenging decisions about where to spend your time and what you want to do, you have these guiding stars to look towards. And good luck. Keep swimming.
This is all wonderful advice. Thank you so much to each of you for all of your time. It's been such a pleasure speaking and learning from all of you. So again, thank you. So that concludes our Design and Innovation student panel for today. Thank you everyone for joining.